Commander Gray stood at the viewport of Unity Central Command, his four-fingered hand pressed against the transparent material as he stared at the stars. The small blue dot in the distant star map had troubled him for years. That tiny world called Earth. "Commander, the Council is waiting," said Blue, his intelligence officer. The slim alien held a datapad tight against his chest, his large eyes blinking nervously. Gray turned from the viewport with a sigh. "Tell me again what the sensors picked up." "The humans have achieved faster-than-light travel," Blue said. "Our deep space monitors detected 5 ships jumping beyond their solar system. Our predictions said this was at least 30 years away." "Humans," Gray muttered, shaking his head. "Always doing the impossible." The Unity Council chamber was filled with representatives from 27 species when Gray arrived. Elder Moss, the ancient tree-like being who led the council, raised a branch for silence. "Commander Gray, explain this urgent matter," Moss creaked. Gray stood tall, his uniform tight across his shoulders. "The humans have broken the light barrier decades ahead of our estimates. Their ships are now capable of reaching our outer systems." Murmurs filled the chamber. Humans were known to be unpredictable. In the centuries the Unity had watched Earth from afar, humans had surprised them repeatedly with their rapid technological growth and their strange mix of cooperation and conflict. "We have 3 options," Gray continued. "First, we can open diplomatic channels and welcome them to the galactic community. Second, we can hide our presence and continue to observe. Third, we can implement containment protocols." "Containment?" asked Representative Dax, her tentacles curling in alarm. "You mean military action against a species that has shown no hostile intent toward us?" "Preventative measures only," Gray clarified. "Humans advance through conflict. Their history is filled with war. When they meet us, their instinct may be to fight, not talk." The debate raged for hours. Gray watched as fear spread through the council. Few had studied humans as he had. Few understood their potential. "We will send scout ships," Elder Moss finally decided. "We need more information before we decide." 3 days later, 5 Unity scout vessels approached the edge of human space. Gray watched the mission feed from command, his stomach tight with worry. "Sir," said Blue from his station, "human ships detected at coordinates 27 to 342. "Are they armed?" Gray asked. "Scanning shows what appear to be weapon systems, but they're not powered." "Wait, they're broadcasting something." The alien technicians worked to decode the human transmission. A voice crackled through the speakers in the Unity's translated common language. "Unknown vessels, this is Captain Mason of the Earth exploration vessel Pathfinder. We come in peace and friendship. Please respond." Gray felt hope rise in his chest. "Tell our ships to respond with." "Sir," shouted Blue, "Scout 5 has fired on the human vessel." "What? Who gave that order?" Gray demanded, rushing to the screen. The feed showed energy beams streaking from the smallest Unity ship toward the human vessel. The human ship's shields flared but held. Junior Officer Red panicked. Blue reported, his voice shaking. "He claims he saw weapon systems powering up, but our other scouts report no such thing." Gray watched in horror as the human ships regrouped with surprising speed. Their formation changed, becoming defensive. No return fire came, but Gray could see they were ready for it. "Open all channels," Gray ordered. "We need to explain this was a mistake." But before they could broadcast, the human ships vanished in flashes of light, jumping away faster than Unity sensors could track. An hour later, long-range sensors lit up across 3 border systems. Blue looked up from his station, his face pale. "Commander," he said quietly, "we're detecting over 50 human vessels approaching Unity space. They're moving in combat formation." The emergency alert blared through Unity space. "Incoming threat. Human forces approaching." Gray closed his eyes. The mistake of one frightened officer might now lead to war with the most unpredictable species the galaxy had ever known. Admiral Smith stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Resolute, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the recording for the 5th time. The unprovoked attack played out on the main screen, a beam of energy striking the Pathfinder without warning or reason. "Play it again," she ordered, her voice steady despite the anger burning in her chest. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward, data tablet in hand. "Admiral, we've analyzed all communications from the alien vessels. They made no attempt to hail us before firing." Smith nodded slowly. "And our casualties? 2 injured, no deaths." The Pathfinder's shields held. The bridge fell silent. Humanity had prepared for this moment for generations. First contact with an advanced alien civilization. They had sent their best ships, their most diplomatic captains, and they had been fired upon. "Recommendations?" Smith asked, looking around at her senior staff. Captain Reed, a veteran of Earth's old wars, spoke first. "We should strike back hard. Show them humans aren't easy targets." Dr. Ward, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, shook her head. "That's exactly what they might expect. We should try to communicate again. This could be a terrible misunderstanding." Smith turned to look at the tactical display, showing 50 Earth ships now moving toward the border of what they believed was alien territory. The President had given her full authority to respond as she saw fit. "We'll do both," Smith decided. "Prepare the fleet for combat, but send the messenger ahead with communication specialists. I want to know who we're dealing with before we start a war." Commander Gray paced the command center, his skin pale with stress. The Unity Council had convened an emergency session, and the communication channels were flooded with frightened messages from border worlds. "We need to broadcast to all human vessels," Gray insisted. "We must explain this was the action of one panicked officer, not Unity policy." Elder Moss's image flickered on the main screen. "The Council is divided, Commander. Many believe we should meet force with force." "That would be a catastrophic mistake," Gray replied. "Our intelligence on humans suggests they respond to threats with overwhelming counterforce. If we escalate, they will escalate further." Blue approached with new data. "Sir, our deep space sensors have detected a single human vessel breaking from their formation. It's broadcasting on all frequencies." "What are they saying?" Gray asked, hope rising in his chest. "We're still translating, but the basic message appears to be a request for dialogue." Gray turned back to Elder Moss's image. "See, they're trying to talk even after we fired first. Give me permission to respond." The Council deliberated while Gray waited, every moment feeling like an eternity. Finally, Moss spoke. "You may establish limited communication, Commander, but the defense fleet will continue to mobilize." Lieutenant Wilson sat at the communications array of the messenger, carefully adjusting the translation algorithms. Captain Lee stood behind her, watching the alien signals cascade across the screen. "Anything?" Lee asked. Wilson's fingers flew across the controls. "There's something. They're responding, but our translators are struggling with the syntax." The bridge crew held their breath as Wilson worked. After several tense minutes, she looked up with wide eyes. "Captain, I've got it. They're saying the attack was unauthorized, a mistake by a junior officer. They're requesting a video dialogue with our command." Lee's face remained impassive. "Could be a trap." "I don't think so, sir," Wilson replied. "The desperation in their messages. I think they're genuinely afraid of us." The captain considered this for a moment before nodding. "Send word to Admiral Smith and prepare a response saying we're willing to talk, but any further aggressive actions will be met with full defensive measures." As Wilson transmitted the message, the tactical display showed the Unity defense fleet growing in numbers. Hundreds of alien ships were moving to intercept the human forces. Back on the Resolute, Admiral Smith received the news with mixed feelings. A mistake, they claimed. A misunderstanding that could lead to interstellar war. "Tell the messenger to proceed with caution," she ordered, "and keep our fleet at combat readiness." The fate of two civilizations now balanced on the edge of a knife. The Unity defensive line formed at the Proxima Nebula, a stunning splash of purple and blue gases that marked the border of their territory. Over 300 ships arranged themselves in the classic crescent formation that had served the Unity well in past conflicts with minor species. Commander Gray watched from the command ship, his stomach tight with worry. The diplomatic channel with the human vessel Messenger remained open, but the translation difficulties made progress painfully slow. "Sir, the human fleet has dropped out of faster-than-light travel," Blue reported. "They're maintaining distance but have formed a unusual pattern." Gray studied the tactical display. The human ships had arranged themselves in small, tight clusters rather than a unified formation. It made no sense according to standard Unity battle doctrine. "What are they doing?" asked Representative Dax, who had joined the command staff as the Council's observer. "I don't know," Gray admitted, "but I don't like it." On the bridge of the Dauntless, Captain Reed watched the alien fleet with practiced eyes. His ship led the forward reconnaissance group of the human forces. "They've got us outnumbered 3-1, his tactical officer noted. Reed nodded calmly. "Numbers aren't everything, Lieutenant. Admiral Smith's battle plan accounts for that." "Sir, I'm still broadcasting peace messages on all frequencies," the communications officer reported, "but they're not responding to our hails." Reed frowned. "Keep trying. Admiral Smith wants every chance for peace before." His words were cut short as energy beams lanced out from several Unity vessels, striking the shields of the forward human ships. "Who fired?" Gray shouted, jumping to his feet as the tactical display showed weapons discharge from several Unity ships. "Border Defense Group 7, Blue replied, his voice shaking. They claimed the human vessels were powering up weapons and launching small craft. "Those are automated sensor drones, not weapons." Gray slammed his fist on the console. "Order all ships to cease fire immediately." But it was too late. The human response came with shocking speed. The scattered human formation suddenly made sense as their ships executed a series of coordinated micro-jumps, blinking in and out of space in a pattern no Unity tactician had ever seen. In seconds, the human vessels had completely bypassed the Unity's defensive line, appearing behind and between their formation. "How are they doing that?" Dax gasped. "Short-range jumps with such precision should be impossible." On the Dauntless, Reed issued calm, measured orders as his ship danced through space. "Target their weapons systems only. Disable, don't destroy." Human ships fired with surgical precision, disabling the weapons on dozens of Unity vessels before the alien forces could even turn to face them. The Unity's crescent formation, designed to concentrate firepower forward, now worked against them as they struggled to track enemies appearing all around them. "We've lost weapons on 67 ships," Blue reported, his voice hollow with shock. "No casualties reported. They're specifically targeting weapons systems and engines." Gray watched in stunned silence. The humans could have destroyed those ships entirely, but chose not to. Even in battle, they were showing restraint. "Order all remaining ships to hold fire," Gray commanded, "and boost power to the translation systems. We need to talk to them now." The Unity flagship broadcast on all frequencies, but in the chaos of battle, communication remained difficult. 3 more waves of precise strikes disabled the majority of the Unity fleet's offensive capabilities within minutes. Admiral Smith watched the battle reports from the Resolute with grim satisfaction. "The Unity fleet is neutralized. Minimal casualties on both sides. They're broadcasting surrender signals," her communications officer reported. Smith nodded. "Tell all ships to cease fire but maintain positions, and get me a direct line to whoever's in charge over there." As the human ships held their positions among the disabled Unity fleet, a message finally came through clearly enough to understand. The translation was rough but unmistakable. "This is Commander Gray of the Galactic Unity. We acknowledge your superior tactics and technology. We request immediate ceasefire and peaceful dialogue." Throughout Unity space, the news spread quickly. The humans had defeated their largest fleet in less than 15 minutes, with barely any loss of life. The emergency broadcasts now carried a different message. Warning: human tactics defy conventional defense. Do not engage. Repeat: do not engage human forces. Gray stared at the tactical display, watching the human ships holding position, weapons powered down but ready. In all his years studying humans, he had underestimated them. They were not just dangerous because of their technology or numbers. They were dangerous because they thought differently than any species the Unity had ever encountered. And now they were here, inside Unity space, waiting to talk. Green, the Unity's chief science officer, hurried through the corridors of the research vessel. The ship floated at a careful distance from the human fleet, sensors gathering every possible bit of data. As Gray's old friend and most trusted advisor, Green had been called away from his regular post to help make sense of what had happened. He found Gray staring at holographic displays showing human ship movements from the recent battle. "You called for me, Commander?" Green asked, his 3 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of nervousness among his species. Gray didn't look away from the displays. "Tell me something I don't know about humans." Green moved closer, studying the battle recordings. "Well, based on my preliminary analysis of their tactics, humans don't think like us. Their ships moved in ways that defy our prediction algorithms." "That's not news," Gray said, finally turning to face his friend. "I need something deeper, something that explains why they disabled our ships rather than destroying them when they clearly could have." Green hesitated, then pulled out his datapad. "I've been studying their communication patterns since we first detected their signals centuries ago. Their languages are strange, filled with contradictions. They use the same words to mean opposite things depending on context. Their art celebrates both conflict and peace simultaneously." "What are you saying?" "I believe humans are a paradox species," Green said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Their evolutionary path forced them to be both highly aggressive and deeply cooperative at the same time. They're predators who care for the weak, warriors who write poetry. They can shift between these contradictory states faster than any species we've encountered." Gray considered this. "And that makes them dangerous. It makes them unpredictable," Green corrected, "but also potentially valuable allies, if we understand them." Lieutenant Wilson sat in the makeshift translation center aboard the Messenger, surrounded by screens displaying alien language patterns. For 3 days, she had worked with minimal sleep, determined to break through the communication barrier. "I think I've got it," she suddenly announced, drawing the attention of Captain Lee and the other specialists. "Their language isn't just words, it's embedded with emotional markers. That's why our standard algorithms couldn't make sense of it." Lee leaned over her shoulder. "Can you translate clearly now?" Wilson nodded, excitement clear on her face. "And more importantly, I've been reviewing all the communications from before the first attack. Look at this." She pulled up a recording from the Unity scout ship that had fired on the Pathfinder. The alien officer's voice came through, now translated. "Unknown vessels approaching with fear marker weapon systems detected, confusion marker, no response to signals, panic marker, must protect scouts, decision marker, firing defensive measures." "They were scared," Wilson said simply. "Their officer panicked because our signal formats were incompatible, and they thought we were ignoring them deliberately." Lee's face softened. "So it really was a misunderstanding." "Sir, this changes everything," Wilson said. "I need to get this to Admiral Smith immediately." Admiral Smith and her senior staff reviewed Wilson's report in the Resolute's secure conference room. "So they didn't intend to start a war," Captain Reed said, sounding almost disappointed. "Their communication system is based on emotional context as much as words," Rodriguez explained, without understanding that both sides have been talking past each other. Smith stood by the viewport, watching the distant lights of the Unity fleet. "Can we be certain this isn't some kind of trick? Some way to make us lower our guard?" "The data is consistent across all their communications," Rodriguez replied. and it explains why they formed a defensive line rather than attacking outright. They were afraid, not aggressive. Smith turned back to her officers. Even if this was a misunderstanding, we've demonstrated our military capabilities. The political leadership will want concessions from them: territory, technology, resources. With respect, Admiral, Wilson said, standing her ground despite speaking to her superior, this is a chance for something more important than territorial gains. This is first contact, a chance to establish peaceful relations with an advanced civilization. The room fell silent as Smith considered this. Finally, she nodded slowly. Prepare a direct communication link to Commander Gray. Let's see if we can have a real conversation now that we understand each other. On Unity Central Command, Gray received the message from the human flagship with a mix of hope and trepidation. The translation was perfect, clear and nuanced in a way previous communications hadn't been. They want to talk, he told Elder Moss and the council representatives. They understand what happened now, and they're willing to discuss terms. Terms of our surrender, Dax asked, still shaken by the humans' display of military superiority. Gray shook his head. No, terms for peace. The Unity propaganda broadcasts filled every screen across their territories. Images of human ships firing on Unity vessels played on repeat, carefully edited to remove the context of the battle. The narrator spoke with grave concern about the human invasion and the need for all Unity citizens to prepare for possible conflict. Commander Gray watched one such broadcast with disgust from his quarters. The diplomatic channel with the humans remained open, but the Unity Council had ordered him to delay any formal meeting. Meanwhile, this fear-mongering spread unchecked. This goes against everything the Unity stands for, Gray told Blue, who sat across from him looking equally troubled. The military leadership is frightened, Blue replied. The humans defeated our best fleet in minutes. Some believe our only hope is to rally all our forces and strike before the humans can bring more ships. Gray slammed his hand on the table. That would be suicide. Did they learn nothing from the first battle? A soft chime interrupted them. Green had arrived with the reports Gray had requested. Tell me you have better news, Gray said as the science officer entered. Green's expression was grim. The Council has ordered evacuation of 3 border worlds. They're using the civilian ships to transport weapons and troops. Gray stood, his decision made. We need to break this cycle of fear before it's too late. The 3 of us are going to speak directly with the humans. Blue's eyes widened. The Council hasn't authorized. The Council is paralyzed by fear. Gray cut him off. If we wait for them, we'll be at war. My personal shuttle leaves in 30 minutes. Are you with me? Admiral Smith faced growing pressure from Earth's government. The video link to the United Earth Council showed the stern faces of political leaders from all major nations. You have them at a disadvantage, Admiral, the Council President said. This is the time to secure human interests in that sector. We want technology transfers, mining rights, and security guarantees. Smith kept her face neutral. Madam President, with respect, I believe premature demands could jeopardize peaceful relations. My officers have made significant breakthroughs in understanding their culture and communication systems. Your job was to protect human interests, not become an anthropologist, said the defense minister sharply. The Unity fired first. Remember that. After the call ended, Smith stared out at the stars, deep in thought. Rodriguez entered with a data pad. More orders from Earth? He asked, noting her expression. They want us to start making demands, Smith replied. They're thinking short-term. Territory. Resources. Rodriguez nodded. Lieutenant Wilson's latest translations of Unity historical records suggest they have medical technology centuries beyond ours, and their understanding of dark matter could revolutionize our energy production. And what might we offer them in return? Smith wondered. Wilson thinks our computational methods are actually more advanced in some areas, and our tactical innovations clearly surprise them. Smith turned as an alert sounded. What's that? A small Unity vessel approaching. Rodriguez reported, checking the display. No weapons, 3 life forms aboard. They're requesting direct communication with you, Admiral. Smith straightened her uniform. Let's hear what they have to say. Gray's small shuttle approached the human flagship with all systems transparent to their scanners. His heart raced as the massive ship grew larger in the viewport. They could destroy us with a single shot, Blue whispered. If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead already, Gray replied. The shuttle bay of the human vessel Resolute engulfed them, massive doors closing behind their small craft. As they prepared to disembark, Gray turned to his companions. Remember, no matter what happens here, we represent the true spirit of the Unity. Peace through understanding. The shuttle door opened to reveal 4 humans waiting for them. Gray recognized Admiral Smith from the video communications, standing tall in her formal uniform. Beside her stood 2 officers and Lieutenant Wilson, whose breakthrough in translation had made this meeting possible. Gray took a deep breath and stepped forward, his hand raised in the Unity gesture of peaceful greeting. Commander Gray of the Galactic Unity, he said, the translation device at his throat converting his words to clear human speech. I come without official sanction because I believe our civilizations stand at a crossroads. What happens in the next few hours may determine peace or war for generations. Admiral Smith studied him for a moment, then raised her hand in a mirror of his gesture. Admiral Smith of Earth, she replied. Welcome aboard the Resolute. I believe we have much to discuss. As they walked from the shuttle bay, an alert sounded throughout both fleets. Gray and Smith both received urgent messages simultaneously. What is it? Smith asked her communications officer. Multiple Unity warships have opened fire on our research vessels in the TA system, the officer reported grimly. At the same moment, Blue turned to Gray with horror. Unity border forces have engaged human ships near the Centauri Gateway. The Council has officially declared a state of war. Gray and Smith locked eyes, the brief moment of hope evaporating between them. It seems, Gray said quietly, that neither of us truly speaks for our people anymore. The war room aboard the Resolute hummed with tense activity as reports flowed in from across space. 3 battles now raged in different systems, with human forces once again showing tactical superiority despite being outnumbered. Admiral Smith stood with Commander Gray, both watching the tactical displays with grim expressions. What had begun as a mission of peace was rapidly spiraling into full-scale war. Your council has made their choice, Smith said quietly. My orders are clear. I'm to secure human interests by any means necessary. Gray turned to face her, desperation in his eyes. This isn't what either of us wants. You know as well as I do that this war benefits no one. What would you have me do? Smith asked. Disobey direct orders. Be relieved of command while someone else leads the human fleet into battle. Green stepped forward, his datapad displaying complex calculations. If I may, Admiral, I've been analyzing the records Lieutenant Wilson translated. There's something you need to see. On the screen appeared ancient Unity historical documents, alongside human medical records Wilson had shared during their earlier discussions. Both our species faced similar extinction-level threats in our past, Green explained. The Unity nearly collapsed from a neural disease that wiped out 3 member species. Humans nearly destroyed themselves in your climate wars. Blue looked confused. What's your point? My point is that we evolved complementary strengths, Green continued. Unity medical science could help treat human diseases your doctors can't cure. And human adaptive thinking could help us solve problems that have stumped Unity scientists for centuries. Smith studied the data, her expression thoughtful. Even if that's true, how does it help us now? Both sides have already drawn blood. Lieutenant Wilson, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Admiral, what if we could show both our civilizations what's at stake? Not just what we might lose in war, but what we might gain in peace. Gray nodded slowly. A direct broadcast to both our peoples, bypassing the politicians and military leaders. That would be mutiny, Blue warned. It would be truth, Gray corrected him. The unity was founded on the principle that diverse species achieve more together than apart. Humans embody that same idea in a single species, thousands of cultures working as one. Smith paced the room, weighing the enormous decision before her. My first duty is to protect Earth. With respect, Admiral, Rodriguez said, the best protection might not be winning this war, but preventing it. Smith looked at each face in the room, her loyal officers, the Unity delegation who had risked everything for peace, and finally back to Gray. We have 6 hours before the main fleets engage, she said. Let's make them count. The Unity Council chamber erupted in outrage as Commander Gray's face appeared on the main screen, standing side by side with Admiral Smith. The unauthorized broadcast was forcing its way through every communication channel, in both human and Unity space. Citizens of Earth and the Galactic Unity, Gray began, his voice steady despite the treason he was committing. I am Commander Gray. For 20 years, I have studied human civilization from afar. Today I stand among them to prevent a war that will devastate both our peoples. I am Admiral Smith of Earth, Smith continued. What began as a tragic misunderstanding has been manipulated by fear and mistrust into the brink of war. Before another life is lost, you deserve to know the truth. Together, they laid out everything. The initial mistake, the communication failures, the breakthrough in translation, and most importantly, what each civilization could offer the other. The Unity possesses medical technology that could end cancer, extend human lifespans, and cure genetic diseases, Smith explained. Humans have computational innovations and tactical thinking that could help solve our energy crisis and protect us from threats beyond our borders, Gray added. As they spoke, Lieutenant Wilson and Green transmitted real data, actual medical protocols, engineering schematics, mathematical proofs, freely given to both civilizations simultaneously. This is what we stand to lose if we continue down the path of war, Smith said. Not just lives, but a future brighter than either of us could achieve alone. On Unity worlds and Earth colonies, citizens watched in fascination as the truth unfolded. Military commanders on both sides hesitated, unwilling to be the ones who destroyed this fragile moment. We ask for a 48-hour ceasefire, Gray concluded, not as Unity or human, but as citizens of the same galaxy with a shared future. The broadcast ended, and for a moment, silence fell across countless worlds. On the Resolute, Smith turned to Gray. Will it be enough? Before Gray could answer, the first responses began flooding in. Not from military commanders or politicians, but from ordinary citizens across both civilizations, demanding their leaders choose peace. The Grand Hall of Unity Central gleamed under soft lights as representatives from both civilizations gathered for the historic signing. 3 months had passed since the broadcast that halted the war. 3 months of careful negotiation, cultural exchange, and growing trust. Commander Gray stood near the center platform, dressed in formal Unity attire, but wearing a small Earth pin gifted to him by Lieutenant Wilson. He watched as humans and Unity species mingled, some awkwardly, others with genuine curiosity. Nervous? Asked Admiral Smith, approaching in her dress uniform adorned with the new insignia of the Joint Fleet. Terrified, Gray admitted with a small smile, but also hopeful. Smith nodded, understanding perfectly. Both of them had risked everything with their unauthorized broadcast. Both had faced charges of treason, and both had been vindicated when the popular movement for peace had proven unstoppable. The Council President is still unhappy with you, Smith observed, nodding toward the elderly Unity leader who watched Gray with narrowed eyes. And your defense minister looks like he'd prefer me in a prison cell, Gray replied, nodding toward the stern-faced human across the room. They shared a moment of quiet laughter, the kind that comes from surviving something that should have destroyed them. Green approach, almost unrecognizable in formal attire. The human medical team has already begun implementing our regenerative protocols in their hospitals. The results are remarkable. And the computational models your mathematicians provided have already helped us map dark energy flows more accurately than ever before, Blue added, joining them with a datapad showing complex calculations. The sound of chimes echoed through the hall, signaling the ceremony was about to begin. Gray took his position alongside Smith at the center of the room. The crowd fell silent as Elder Moss and the Earth President took their places at the signing table. Today marks not an ending, but a beginning. The Earth President began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. What started with fear and misunderstanding now leads us toward a shared future brighter than either of our civilizations could have achieved alone. Elder Moss extended his branches in the traditional unity gesture of unity. For centuries, the galactic unity has brought different species together in peace. Today, we welcome humanity not as adversaries, but as our newest and perhaps most promising members. The treaty itself was simple in concept but profound in meaning. Earth would join the unity as an equal partner, with special provisions acknowledging human innovation and tactical thinking. In return, unity medical science, environmental technology, and centuries of knowledge would be shared freely with humanity. As the leaders signed the document, Gray felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Lieutenant Wilson appeared beside him, her face bright with pride. "They're calling it the Gray-Smith Doctrine," she said quietly. "The idea that understanding must precede judgment." Smith looked slightly embarrassed. "I wanted no part of naming it, but they insisted." "What happens now?" Blue asked, watching as the two leaders shook hands to thunderous applause. "Now comes the hard part," Gray replied. "Building something that lasts." The ceremony concluded with a gesture that had been Wilson's idea. A simultaneous broadcast to every world in both civilizations, showing not politicians or military leaders, but ordinary people sharing their hopes for the future. As the hall emptied and dignitaries moved to the reception, Gray found himself alone with Smith for a moment, looking out at the stars through a large viewport. "Do you ever think about how differently this could have ended?" Smith asked. Gray nodded. "Every day. One wrong word, one more shot fired, one leader too proud to step back. When I first heard the alert, incoming threat, human forces approaching, I never imagined we'd end up here," Smith said. "Perhaps that's the greatest lesson in all this," Gray replied. "That what we initially perceive as threats can become our greatest opportunities." Smith smiled. "I've been offered command of the first Joint Exploration Fleet, ships from both our worlds, heading into uncharted space. And I've been asked to serve as your first officer," Gray said, "if you'll have me." Smith extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. "The Resolute leaves in 3 weeks. I can think of no one better to help us navigate the unknown." As they shook hands, a small crowd of young Unity and human officers watched from across the room, whispering excitedly. They were the first class of the Joint Academy, the future of both civilizations working together. Gray looked at them and felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time. True hope for the future. "To new horizons," Smith said, following his gaze. "And to understanding," Gray added, "before judgment." Outside the viewport, ships from both fleets performed a ceremonial flyby, no longer in combat formation, but in a new pattern they had designed together. Neither fully human nor fully unity, but something new and stronger than either could have created alone.